Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's We Hold These Truths Speaks Out. But before we start this evening, let's open with a word of prayer. Lord Jesus, you are the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through you. Guide us tonight, I pray, as we discuss this program, and may we search for the truth and find the truth, because ultimately the truth is in you. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're going to have our founder and basically the organizer of We Hold These Truths, Chuck Carlson. He'll be discussing a new project that we're going to take on in June. And this is kind of the first introduction to the subject. And the subject is how Zionism, specifically Christian Zionism, how Zionism has attached itself to and influenced traditional mainline Christianity. Chuck, take it away.
Thank you very much, Craig. We have been studying Christian Zionism for a long time. And when we began, the term wasn't used much. Christian Zionism really wasn't used. We thought and believed that Christian Zionism was pretty much limited to the evangelical churches that many of us belonged to. I belonged to a Southern Baptist church at that time and realized later that Zionism was active and well within my church. As such, Christian Zionism has influenced the vote of somewhere between 35 and 50 million people, and is given credit for swinging presidential elections. And it's caused a great deal of concern among people who are trying to compete in the political circles, and also in the question of war and peace. Let's start out with asking Craig to give us a definition of Christian Zionism that would be a popular one that we would tend to hear around.
Well, Chuck, I mean, our whole website is basically dedicated to exposing what Christian Zionism is, the roots of it, and so forth and so on. So just to put it in a thumbnail, basically is the belief that the Jews that call themselves Jews have a direct lineage and ancestry to the Abrahamic covenant of the Old Testament, that they have a right to the land that it was called Palestine, called the Holy Land, that they have a real estate right, a deed, if you will, to that land, and that them going back to the land and taking over from Palestinians in 1948 is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I mean, obviously we can talk for hours, because that's what happened when I found out about Christian Zionism. I did a search on Christian Zionism, and We Hold These Truths came up to the top. I like to say the rest is history.
Well, we weren't the first to invent the term, but it was not very popular when we started. And the question that we're getting into now, as we go along, is that the big shocker is that the Christian Zionist movement is very much involved in the traditional and mainline churches that we thought were immune to it. We thought they simply did not believe in the notion that the state of Israel is the fulfillment of prophecy of the Bible, and therefore that the state of Israel is somehow holy, and that the people in it are excused from every human frailty, every abuse that you can think of, because they've been given the land. We assumed that this notion was exclusive to the evangelical firms that have long held that Israel is a holy people, different from the rest of us. The mainline churches, which we refer to them primarily as, you think of them as the Lutherans, Presbyterians, Methodists, and United Church of Christ, and Catholics, of course, and even some Baptist groups that simply don't believe that God ordained a piece of land to anyone. We simply believe that we have to deal with God personally. Along came two groups, and they have essentially dealt with Christian Zionist churches. That is primarily the Southern Baptist Church and other churches related, lots of independent churches that have accepted the notion of Christian Zionism. But Precept Ministries has become teachers in those churches. They've conducted classes there. The other organization that's also conducted classes there is BSF, Bible Study Fellowship International. These are the two primary groups that are in the business of promoting Christian Zionism in churches. Google search of the founder of Bible Study Fellowship, Mrs. Kay Arthur, and she's first generation in the family, and it's now a second generation organization. But Kay Arthur has.
Excuse me, Chuck.
Yes.
She's the founder of Precepts Ministries, not Bible. I want to correct you on that. Kay Arthur.
Thank you very much, Tom. You're absolutely right.
Bible Fellowship Studies.
Kay Arthur is the founder, her husband was the founder of Precept Ministries, and the other big one that we'll be talking about is Bible Study Fellowship International, BSF International. If you do a Google search of Kay Arthur Zionism, it will produce well over 1 million responses on a Google connections of Kay Arthur to Zionism. So the organization Precept Ministries is pretty much an open book that it is a pro-Zionist organization, and it doesn't really hide it. It has annual, very large, powerful tours to Israel. It takes junkets over there, signing up people now for the 2021 tour, and I believe it's conducted somewhere between 20 and 25 of these tours over the years. So if you look at Precept Ministries, it's pretty much an open book on selling the idea of Christian Zionism, and it is very prominent in thousands of evangelical dispensational churches, where it basically comes into the church, puts on programs. The church allows Precept Ministries usually free rental of the facility, and they provide the Bible study for the church. Small churches may have only one such study going on. Larger churches may have others as well. But in these church sessions, Precept Ministries teaches Christian Zionism somewhat in circumspect fashion, but quite obvious and apparent if you look at the connections of the leaders, Kay Arthur and others, that they essentially are in love with Israel. In fact, Kay Arthur wrote a book, Israel, My Beloved. No, not America, my beloved, or France, my beloved, if she was French, but Israel, my beloved, by author Kay Arthur. So what I'm saying is it's not very well hidden. The reason for this is that the evangelical dispensational churches, like the Southern Baptist Convention and the many independent churches that you read about and hear about and know about in your neighborhood, essentially they're open to the notion of Christian Zionism. However, over the years, we have thought that the mainline or traditional Christian churches didn't believe that any state was a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, or that any people were ordained any piece of real estate as a result of Abraham's actions. And we had the unfortunately we had the notion that the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, and even the Roman Catholics didn't accept any of these ideas and would not be taken up and influenced by the doctrine of Christian Zionism. We found that that's untrue. The reason it's untrue is that Bible Study Fellowship and Precept Ministries have both become very prominent and successful in getting into mainline churches that are not Christian Zionist in nature, that have the traditional theology, and they have managed to sell numbers of people in these churches on the notion of Zionism. And they have essentially neutralized the opposition to the treatment of the Palestinians. The mainline churches do not overtly come out, as the evangelical churches do not. They don't overtly come out and sell Israel, my love, to their congregations. They don't advertise that they are in Zionist, that they're following Christian Zionism, but they have come to be influential in that area. And we've discovered this more or less recently. Now, you might ask the question of why does it take so long for us and for others to figure out what Christian Zionism is and what their role of these organizations is in Christian Zionism? The answer to this is that their actions are done slowly, steadily, methodically, and circumspectly. In the case of K. Arthur and Bible Precept Ministries, thank you, Tom. In the case of Precept Ministries, K. Arthur is right out in the open about what she believes, but this doesn't seem to filter through entirely to the people in the churches that are influenced. As a result of that, there are lots of churches in everybody's town that essentially has these Bible studies taught. Now, as I said, it's taken a long time for us to figure this out, and it's because of the subtlety and that subtlety is an indication of planning. When things are done consistently, subtly, systematically, it's because someone has decided they want it done that way and they're planning it. And so the movement to sell Zionism within mainline churches has required this kind of a position. Tom, your wife, who we know, and I knew very, very well, was a teacher in Precept Ministries. And tell us just briefly how long it took for her to figure it out, how she figured it out, and a little bit about the subtleties of the teachings that are going on in these churches.
Well, it's my wife taught, I think, about 50 Precept Ministry courses before she decided to stop teaching them. And she had, as a little bit of background, went to a dispensational college, and we won't get into that, but dispensationalism is a relatively new form of Christianity that's less than 200 years old. And Christian Zionism would be at the extreme end of dispensationalism, which has to do with end times and the belief in the rapture and all these kinds of things. So the thing about the Precepts Ministries is they have these prepackaged courses. My wife would do extra things to PowerPoints and so forth for her classes. She really worked at it. And K. Arthur is very engaging. I've heard her live at an event here in Phoenix. So this is more than 15 years ago, I guess. And so, yeah, she's very personable. And unless you did a search like what you did, Chuck, you probably wouldn't find that out, that she is a radical Christian Zionist. But my wife was a very thoughtful woman, and she was a diligent student of the Bible. And she was very sympathetic to what we are doing here at We Hold These Truths. I have my T-shirt here, Pray for Gaza. Christian Zionists wouldn't pray for Gaza, even the inhabitants there. They typically pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They really are blinded to what is happening to the Palestinians, including Palestinian Christians. That's the remarkable thing, I think. But my wife had enough strength of conviction to actually come to me a number of years before she passed away to tell me that she was no longer going to teach this because of this this undertow, if you will. The courses, probably you could equate them to rat poisoning. 95% of it is inert, or more, probably 99% is very biblical, and but it's that 1%, that poison pill that comes through. And I don't think she was really promoting that Christian Zionist line at any time, but it's bent that way. So it's very difficult to come out of it. And so that's the story that I have to tell, Chuck.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was very revealing, and is very typical, and it's surprising because of what we've pointed out that Kay Arthur is right out in the open. Now, the other big, powerful organization, international also, that teaches Christian Zionism within mainline churches, and of course they teach it within all kinds of evangelical churches. You can hardly find an evangelical church that has outside Bible studies that's not using one of these organizations. But the other one is BSF International, Bible Study Fellowship International. It is truly a mysterious organization. The budget of it is listed at $13 million a year, started in 1969, but a search of Christian Zionism along with BSF International doesn't produce much of any connections. In other words, they have managed to stay pretty much free of being labeled a Christian Zionist organization. And the $13 million budget is probably, and I'm guessing at this, I don't have proof of it as yet, but we will probably end up with proof of it. We suspect strongly that BSF and Precept Ministries both get a lot of support from the state of Israel because they hold these junkets, they're there, and they meet with powerful people, and so on and so forth. In the case of BSF, just taking a look at it, there are many classes taught by Precept Ministries, but BSF is very public about theirs. If you go put a Google search on Bible Study Fellowship, Denver, Colorado, it will pop up 32 churches that teach BSF classes for them right in their churches. These are the churches I'm talking about that allow BSF to actually use their facility and teach these things. Now, this is really the tip of the iceberg, because it turns out that many of the churches that allow or encourage BSF, Bible Study Fellowship, to use their facilities are not listed among these 32 on the map. And when you get to looking at the ones who are not listed, many of them are mainline churches. Now, some of the 32 are also mainline. I believe 6 of the 32, if I recall, were obvious mainline churches, Lutheran, Presbyterian, and so on. But the ones that are not listed, and the reason we know this is we know people that take Bible studies from some of these other churches. We have no idea how many there are, but it's been said that you could hardly find a church in Colorado that has not either have a BSF teaching in it, or has been approached at one time, or has had one at one time. So we're seeing here that Bible study fellowship is penetrated the massive number of mainline churches and is active and well in there. Now, you might ask, well, why do the churches put up with them teaching a doctrine that is antithetical to what Lutherans believe, Presbyterians believe, Methodists believe? They don't believe that the state of Israel is a holy exception to God's will, that you have to be involved with Christ in order to have God's be one of God's children. They don't believe that the state of Israel is automatically holy because of something Abraham supposedly learned on a mountaintop. No, they don't believe that at all. But why do they tolerate these sessions going on? Again, it points out the cleverness of the organizations, and of course the fact that these two organizations are obviously well funded somewhere else. Because as Tom could tell us, I'm sure from Linda's history, the Bible study groups do not wade in and try to participate in the revenues of the churches that allow them in the door. They remain very tight budgeted. They don't ask for solicitations, at least not much, and it's so very voluntary. They basically stay friendly to the parent church, and then they teach the Bible studies fairly free of obvious evangelicalism. And maybe Tom, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, well, they do these like precepts of ministry. I'm familiar with this, of course, provides material. So the participants, my wife taught women's classes, would buy a workbook, and she, of course, would supplement it. So there is some, but it's very nominal as far as the cost. It's not a big moneymaker, I would guess. I'm not sure.
Thanks, Tom. And that's what we're trying to express here, is that these organizations know how to stay friendly with the church leadership. And of course, as Tom can also relate, the heavy duty dispensational stuff, the 1% of poison that Tom talked about, most of that's put across in home meetings where people come to the homes of the facilitator or organizer, and there they are indoctrinated. The messages that are put across in the church-sponsored meetings are probably pretty acceptable to the churches. The bottom line is that Precept Ministries and BSF are teaching Zionist theology inside of your denomination. And there's no real organized resistance to this. Why? Part of it, as I said, probably because they know how to be friendly with the church. Well, they are basically poisoning it, if I may be so bold, because Christian Zionism is a poison that leads people to believe that one race is superior over another, that the Palestinian people are not to be worried about because it's God's will. They're in the way, and Israel is granted God's sovereignty over that land, and therefore whatever they do to supposedly protect themselves from the marauding Arabs is acceptable, even if it involves killing them. And that's one of the reasons we're in this, is because we are a pro-life organization. We're for the lives of Palestinian people. We're also for the lives of Jewish people. And we're against killing in wars. We're against killing for any purpose and reason. So this comes right down on the question of what is Christian Zionism. It is, among other things, it is endorsing a movement that ends up with killing lots and lots of people. The people who go to these meetings, many of them are women. They're influential. We all know women are very influential. Tom knows that. I think Craig is well aware of that, and I'm really aware of it. And in the church I go to, which is the Mainline church, I was in the church for 2 years before I knew they had a BSF course in the church. It had been taught for a long time. Very quiet, not discussed. The ladies, however, knew all about it because it was mostly women who went to the meeting. My wife knew about it before I did. So these organizations then get into the churches and they have access to the membership. They talk to my wife. They eventually talk to me. Would you like to come to the programs? So this goes on, and gradually you have an effect made. We've also found cases where pastors are actually afraid of their membership. There has been such a expansion of this movement within that recently met someone like that, and the pastor may fear loss of membership if he comes down too hard on what's being taught in the BSF meeting or precepts meeting. So the access to membership is where the poison is administered, and our purpose and objective and our plan. Well, we want to inform mainline churches what's going on because, to our utter amazement, the leadership, oftentimes the pastor of these churches, really doesn't know what's taught there. It goes on quietly. The church is happy to have someone doing the teaching. They're happy, and especially in smaller churches, they're happy to have someone come in and do an organized study. They think it's good for membership of the church, and they don't look too hard at what's going on. So, Craig, do you have any thoughts or questions to contribute? What have I left out?
Craig, you're still muted. Unmute yourself, Craig.
I attended a mainline church that had both precepts and BSF, and what was interesting is that the pastor knew about their Zionist leading, but he wouldn't address that. And what I found is that he was so happy that members of the church would actually be in the Bible study, that they were. He was glad that they would be in that Bible study, and so that he was looking forward to that membership, the education and the membership. He didn't see Christian Zionism as the threat that we do. And also another point is that I saw that it became a political. If you talk about the nation of Israel and all of that, and this, it becomes a political issue, and a lot of Christians will stay away from anything that smells or looks like the politics anywhere. So they don't touch it for that regard. But they don't really see what it's doing to their brothers and sisters in Christ in Palestine, and how this is anti-Jesus. It's an basically human or movement, and they don't want to go there. So there's a lot of things. And then one other thing that theologically, and this really bugs me, is that it looks like it's pretty much like Islam. If Allah wills, God's in control. Everything that's working out is according to His plan, and we just kind of sit back and let God do His thing. Obviously, I don't agree with that, and most of us don't. That we have a part to play, and Jesus has called us to be faithful.
Thank you, Craig. Tom, in wrapping up, do you have anything to add here before I give a closing remark?
Well, thanks, Chuck. Yes, it is so subtle. The fact that my wife, it took her 50 of these lessons. I mean, she went to Chattanooga, the headquarters of Precepts Ministries, and trained there. And so she was a dedicated Bible student. But for her to come out of this actually required that she had to develop her own Bible study. And so that, to me, is a sign of what a true Christian is all about, is that we're all deceived. We don't have all the truth. And we have a lot of intellectual derelicts out there that reminds me of the expression, morality sees further than intellect. And so this intellect can blind these people to the reality of what's happening to our Christian brothers and sisters in Christ in Palestine, that actually blinds them. So it's a real conditioning thing. And so it's something that we're asking people to actually look into. Don't take our word for what we're saying here. Do a little research on your own. And it is something very important that churches look at this and face the truth. But unfortunately, many churches, just like Craig was describing, don't want to address the elephant in the room. And Christian Zionism is that elephant in the non-Christian element in the room. That Christian Zionism, as we talked about, is an oxymoron. It's not Christianity.
Thanks, Tom. We do expect, we have had resistance in our efforts in the last 18 years or so from evangelical churches. They have not wanted to hear a message. They were complacent. They were happy with what they're doing, and they were able to convince themselves that it's God's will. We don't expect that kind of resistance from the movement we're started. We think that mainline churches will listen, although, as Craig has pointed out, there is always going to be inertia that makes it difficult to get through to people. This project, you're going to be hearing more about it. This is not the last time we're going to be talking about it. We take this dead serious, and we are going to be making a project of it. We're hoping to have many people join us. We hope our listeners will call us and tell us they want to volunteer. We would even take money to help support the effort that we're getting into. I want to close by saying this. Christ-loving mainline churches are both the victims of this movement, this current movement, and they are also the promise of it. It is them who will change first. The evangelicals will someday maybe change. It will affect elections. It will affect all kinds of things. And it is the hope that we have that we will be able to approach these people. Please look at our new website, which will be focused upon this and other similar issues. And we'll look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.